Hey everyone, welcome back to Financial Freedom Friday. It's Nate here again. Glad to bring you tips and strategies to help you find financial freedom. Today we're going to talk about a question I get quite often actually, and it's should I fund or should I put money into my 401k? It happens all the time, people ask it. I think the 401k is probably the biggest tool that's being used in America for the most part, just for the average American to try to build wealth to retire on one day. It's probably the most common one. And so I get this question quite a bit because almost everyone is plugged in when they get to a new employer. Most of us, though, I really do think would agree, if we really step back and think about it, most of us would agree that the 401k has many inherent problems in it. It has things like, it's well documented that the 401ks has incredibly exorbitant fees compared to everything else that you could do. With the mutual fund fees, the 401k management fees and the things that come into play, it's not the cheapest way to invest. So it has high fees. I'm really concerned for people who are doing a lot of tax deferral strategies that they're going to end up being this huge tax liability in the future. We're $21 trillion in debt, running a budget deficit every year. Sooner or later, we're going to have to pay on this stuff. And it's just getting bigger and bigger every year. I think the only way reasonably is that they're going to raise taxes on all of us. When you get older, you lose deductions. As kids move away, you pay off your house. So we're putting money into this 401k that's tax deferred, and we're hoping that we pay less in taxes in the future when we pull from it. It's 100% taxable as regular income at that point. And if you're in a higher tax brackets, which a lot of people are finding that they're in at this point, that could be bad. It can also cause your Social Security income to be taxed. So we have some tax issues with the deferral of the 401k. We've got the penalties, the early withdrawal penalties and restrictions. Many times you can take a loan out, but it has to be repaid on terms for 60 months. And if you don't, you get penalized. Some people can't even touch the money at all if you're still working there. So a lot of inherent problems, illiquidity, all the way through. And then on top of that, one more point is that it's found that most 401ks and the mutual funds that you're in, there may not be the best returns, just to be honest with you. So the only thing that it has going for it is this employer match. So it has all these inherent problems that people don't really care for, but we bring it around and say, well, it has this match. The employer's going to match 3% or 6% or some sort of percentage of your income that if you put that in, then they'll match it. And I hear things like, it's a 100% rate of return, which is false. It's free money, and I'm not going to say no to free money. We hear these things all the time, and I'm not an absolutist, by the way. I don't think very rarely financially is something absolutely the best way to do it. Very subjective. So I'm not here to say that you shouldn't, but I am here to say that the 401k, the match, is not a 100% rate of return, and it's not free money. It always has to be compared to what else you could have done with it. So I've got an example. I've got a guy who I know very well who was in a 403B. It's really like a 401k but for nonprofits. And he was in it from 1992 to 2012. And during that time frame, if you run the numbers, the S&P 500, if you include the dividends, it grew by like 9% or a little bit over 9% on average during that time frame. You know what his real return in his 403B was? It was 4%. And that's not uncommon. Don't get me wrong, that is not uncommon. To be in a mutual fund that is not, up to par, you would say. And some people say, well, what about the match? Well, I'm simply saying, if you were going to put $5,000 a year in yourself, or if you were going to get a match on that and have $10,000 a year, it's not like it's 100% rate of return, because I ran the numbers. And if you were to earn a 4% rate of return on $10,000 a year over a 30-year time frame, you would have less money than if you did 5% or $5,000 a year, just no match, and earned 8% on your money. So in other words, it's not a 100% rate of return. You'd actually have more money without it if you had earned what the market was actually supposed to do and you weren't in some crappy mutual fund. So what I'm trying to say is the employer match is great. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You have to take into account, but you have to take into account everything else that is in the 401k to determine, is the employer match worth doing this. In other words, you have to take into account the looming tax liability in the future. You have to decide, am I really going to be taxed at a lower rate in the future? Is that really going to happen? If it's not, well, then you have to take that into account against the employer match. Say, okay, I know that if I do this, I may pay more taxes than if I did something else. So that has to be in there. The fees, there's many hidden fees in the 401k. You don't even know what you're paying in fees. That immediately gets taken out. I had another guy who the employer match was just large enough to pay the exorbitant fees that were involved in his 401k. So you have to take that into account, the fact that you could probably go somewhere else and have less fees in the future. It could be also taking into account the lack of use of the money and the penalties and the stipulations there. So you can only leave it in there for a long time. So what I'm saying is you have to compare all the problems that are inherent with a 401k and compare that to the fact that you're getting a match. And if you feel that getting the match overcomes all of those problems, then do it. Please do it. I think that's great for you. If you're somebody who says, I'm afraid the taxes are going to go up and I'm going to be higher and more tax liabilities, the fees are too high, the returns inside the 401k are not known to be as good as what you might be able to get elsewhere if you were to use it on your own, the fact that I can't invest elsewhere on my own in real estate and other things, if you take all of those into account, then you might say, no, that's not even worth getting the match. I'd rather take my money and go use it elsewhere to produce return. So once again, the match is the only good redeeming thing about a 401k, but that doesn't mean it's free money, 100% rate of return. You always have to compare it to what else you could have done with that money. Make sure it's really what you believe in and what you want to do, and then go for it. But if not, then take control of the money and go use it to go produce what you feel is what's right to do. And remember, nobody's going to build your financial freedom for you. So let's get to work. We'll see you in a couple weeks.